Ms. Littles, before I get to what transpired when Officer Benner came back to the car, I need to ask you a couple of questions about the gun, okay?
Okay.
Now, you testified on direct examination that this is a 9mm Beretta, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think you testified, I know you said in the past, that Andrew kept it loaded, right?
Yes.
And loaded means to you one in the chamber, right?
Yes.
Like it's loaded and ready to go.
Yes.
And you testified that this is Andrew's gun, right?
Yes.
And that it had it, you said in the past, for some period of time, right?
Yes.
But you know how to shoot it, right?
No.
You don't know how to hold a gun by the grip and pull the trigger?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Most certainly you do. You know how to pick a gun up and hold it by the handle and put your finger on the trigger and pull that trigger and...
Counsel's testifying at this point.
It's a cross-examination, Judge. I get some latitude. You understand how to hold a pistol by the grip, pull the trigger, and make that gun go off, right?
Yes.
And this Beretta 9mm that we're talking about is no different, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, Officer Benner comes back to the window, and he's standing at the driver's side window, correct?
Correct.
And he's talking to you.
Correct.
And he says to Andrew something to the effect of, your info's not coming back. And your testimony is, Andrew said, I gave you my fucking information, right? Right?
Yes, sir.
And then after Andrew says that, according to you, Officer Benner walked around to the front of the car, right?
Yes.
And began trying to open the door, right?
Yes.
Okay. And Andrew didn't fire at the officer when he's at his window, point blank range, did he?
No.
And the door was locked, right?
Yes.
And so this is at the point of the story which you say Andrew threw you out of the car, right?
Okay.
Well, just say yes. Now, I'm going to ask you to explain it in a minute.
That's not what she's testifying to.
Just say yes or no. Did you testify previously that Andrew threw you out of the car?
At what point, Your Honor? I mean, that's not what you testified to.
All right. After the officer began to try to get in the door, right? I left out a part. I apologize. The car, Andrew, according to you, put the car in drive and told you drive, bitch, right?
Yes.
And then Officer Benner runs back to his car and begins to give chase, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the vehicle came, your vehicle, the Dodge Durango, came at least to a rolling stop, right?
Yes.
And you were then thrown out of the vehicle, right?
I was pushed out of the vehicle.
Pushed out of the vehicle. Explain to the jury exactly how you get pushed out of the vehicle.
After Andrew had put the car in drive, and I had put the gas on, and almost ran into the bush. He was like, fucking watch out. And he grabs the wheel and turns it a little bit. And the car continues to go straight. He jumps on top of me, opens the door, and pushes me out.
And all of this is while the car is still in motion, right?
Yes.
The car is still moving, correct?
Yes.
Now, who opened the door, you or Andrew?
Andrew.
So he's driving with one hand and opened the door with the other?
Yes.
And how much did you weigh then?
I don't recall.
Well, are you heavier now than before? Because I think you said you weighed about 190 and some change, right?
I'm heavier now than I was before.
Well, were you more than 150?
I don't.
And I'm not trying to be mean, man.
I don't recall.
Okay. So your testimony is, I guess, Andrew opened the door with one hand, right? He's driving you with the other. Which hand is he throwing you out of the car with?
Well, when he opens the door, I just fall out.
Fall out, but he's on top of you.
Okay. When he is coming over from his seat, okay, he has his hand on the steering wheel. He's opening the door, and then he kind of budges me out.
And the car's moving.
Yeah, at a slow rate.
And you hit the ground.
Yes, not hard.
So he threw you out soft.
He pushed me out.
And you hit the ground soft.
I mean, I didn't get no scrapes on me.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. You're pushed from a moving vehicle, right?
Yes.
But there weren't any abrasions on your butt, right?
No.
You didn't have any scrapes on your elbows, right?
No.
Now this isn't, you're not landing in grass, right?
No.
You're not landing on sand like a playground, right?
No.
You're landing on the road, the roadway, the pavement.
Yes.
Yet you don't have a single abrasion on your rear end.
Right.
Now, were you wearing really thick jeans?
No.
You were wearing like sweatpants, right?
No, I was wearing leggings.
Like, oh, thinner than sweatpants.
Yes, but thick leggings though.
Okay. And the leggings, were they torn or scraped or damaged in any way?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Well, did you see any tears or scrapes or even the tiniest bit of damage to your pants?
I never paid attention.
Okay. But you certainly do know that you didn't have any abrasions or scrapes or bruises on your butt, right?
Correct.
Or the back of your legs?
Correct.
Or your knees?
Correct.
Or your elbows?
Correct.
Or your back?
Correct.
Now, where were your hands when you fell? Did you catch yourself when you hit the ground?
I don't recall.
Well, did you have any bruising on your
No.
palm of your hands?
No.
Did you have any like gravel embedded in your hands?
I don't recall.
Did you have anything on the back of your hands?
No.
So your testimony to the jury is that you were thrown from a moving car, yet
I was pushed from a moving car.
Pushed from
And
a
it was going at a slow rate. It wasn't going more than, it wasn't going fast. It was going slow when he opened the door to let me
I
out,
got
to push
you.
me out.
And you're telling the jury that you're pushed from a moving vehicle,
Yes.
and you sustained no injuries whatsoever.
Correct.
Okay. Let me show you what's been previously marked as States 280. Now this is, well, what is that? Well, it's upside down. What is that?
Right on my shoulder?
No, what is the person in the bed? Is that you?
Oh, that's me.
Would that be an accurate description of your appearance at the time?
Yes.
And that would be generally descriptive of your weight?
Yeah.
I mean, you are what you are, right?
Yeah.
And the photograph depicts how big or small you were at the time, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so you hit the ground without any damage, and what happens next?
The officer, the Durango pulls up past me.
How far?
I'm not accurate at the distance.
Well, was it between me and you?
I'm not accurate. I'm not actually. I can't recall exactly how.
Well, you were certainly present this day, right?
Yes, I was.
And had you already stood up when the Durango starts to pull away? You were
No,
still sitting down?
I was still sitting down.
Kind of surveying from the ground, right? You were looking around?
Yes.
Still on the ground.
Yes.
All right, the Durango pulls away, but you don't know what distance, right?
Right.
And Officer Benner runs past you from his vehicle toward the Durango, correct?
He jumps out of his vehicle. He runs towards me. He asks me if I'm okay. I said yes. And he takes off running towards the Durango.
All right. Now, this happened very, very quickly, right?
Very quickly.
From the time you were pushed, as you say, from the vehicle until the time the officer ran toward the vehicle was just a matter of seconds, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the officer says, "Are you okay?" And you respond, "Yes."
Yes.
And your testimony is that the officer made it to about the post between the rear seat and the front seat, right?
Correct.
And then you hear shots.
I seen Officer Benner when he ran towards the vehicle. He got to a little bit to the back, at least the back door, and that's when I heard the shots. I heard the shots as I was getting up off the ground, so I was not facing that way.
Right. And was Officer Benner, as he was running toward the vehicle, and this sounds like a really serious question, a really silly question, but Officer Benner had his back to you when he was running away from you to the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And his back remained to you the entire time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You never saw Officer Benner turn to run away?
When I was getting up off the ground, the last time I looked towards the vehicle, Officer Benner was running towards the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
At that time,
he
I
has
was
back to you.
yes. At that time, I was getting up off the ground.
Okay.
Next thing I know, I hear shots.
And
that's when I'm looking around to see what happened. That's when I see Officer Benner turn and say, what was his name?
Okay, so at the time of the shots, Officer Benner was still facing the Durango, correct?
I wasn't looking that way when the shots went off.
Okay, but after the shots were fired, you see him turn and come back toward you. See Officer Benner turn and come back toward you, correct?
After I heard the shots is when I was looking around, I noticed he turned around. He was facing me at that time.
Okay, and Officer Benner, based on your testimony, is walking, right? After the shots are fired, he's walking toward you.
Real slow.
And
He
then
takes maybe a couple steps.
And then he
And he
collapses.
collapses, yes, sir.
Okay, how close is Officer Benner to the side of the Durango?
I don't recall.
When Officer Benner runs past you, how close is he to the Durango?
I can't recall distances, but hold on.
That's your answer?
I can't recall distances.
May I approach the witness, Judge? Is Officer Benner from me to you to the Durango?
I don't remember.
How about from me to here?
I don't remember.
You don't remember anything about where Officer Benner was positioned in relationship to the Durango?
No.
Okay. The answer is no?
No.
You never saw the door of the Durango open as Officer Benner was approaching the Durango, did you?
The door of the Durango was open when Andrew was throwing my property out of the truck.
It was open.
Yes, it was.
Okay. And was Andrew throwing you things out before or after?
He was throwing the stuff out before Officer Benner approached the vehicle.
Okay. And then was the vehicle pulling away when you heard the shots?
I don't recall because when I was in the process, I was standing up is when I heard the shots. That's when I was looking around and I didn't even realize what had happened.
Okay. How'd the Cheeto bag get on the ground?
I don't recall.
Have you ever been made aware that Officer Benner's blood's on the Cheeto bag?
Yes.
You don't have any explanation on how the Cheeto bag that you purchased at the Valero is on the ground next to Officer Benner with his blood on it?
No.
Now, after the stop and before you are thrown from the vehicle as you've described, where did you put the meth that belonged to you?
Before we got pulled over, I had got the meth and I put it in my bra.
Okay. And how much meth did you have with you?
I don't recall.
Well, let's think real hard. How much did you purchase?
I had purchased a gram, but I had stopped at the halfway house and sold a gram. So I had a little bit less than I don't recall exactly how much I had.
It was enough you wanted to hold on to, right?
Yes.
It was enough, as we've already talked about, to get you sent back to prison, right?
Excuse me?
It was enough that you wanted to keep, right?
Yes.
And it was enough that would have gotten you sent back to prison had you been caught with it, right?
Yes.
And I think your previous testimony is you stuck it in your bra, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, so you have the meth in your bra, your stuff's all over the ground, Officer Benner collapses, and you realize you'd been shot in the foot, right? Based on your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And at any time, did you rush to the officer's side to render aid?
No.
At any time, did you use your phone to call 911?
No.
At any time, did you offer any assistance to the officer as he lay dying on the pavement?
No.
In fact, you went and sat down on the side of the curb, right?
I was walking and one of the people told me just sit down on the curb.
And instead of attempting to offer aid or see if you could be of any assistance, you called out to individuals, hey, look at me, I've been shot, right?
Yes.
Yeah, not, oh my God, the officer's dying, what can I do to help? right?
No.
Hey, look at me. I got shot in the foot. Right?
Right.
Somebody help me. I got a foot wound. Right? Where's the paramedic who's going to help me? Right? Yes?
Yes.
And those paramedics weren't helping you because an officer was on the ground bleeding to death, right?
Correct.
Not 10 feet away from you. Right?
Correct.
All you could think about was the foot wound, right? And how quickly somebody could get to you. Right?
Yes, because I was scared.
That's not really a very good explanation, isn't it, Miss Littles?
Objection. For the trier of fact, Your Honor.
Well, let me ask it a different way. You might have been scared, right? You were also very, very concerned that you were in a big deal of trouble, right? Right?
Yes.
You weren't nearly as scared that the foot was hurt or that the officer was dying. You were thinking about what might happen to you, right?
At that time, I wasn't thinking of anything.
Because you were so stoned?
Because I just wasn't thinking about anything right at that time. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about nothing.
Were you high?
I was high.
Were you so high that you couldn't contemplate what was going to happen to you with the dead cop on the ground?
No, I wasn't that high. I'm coherent when I'm high.
And so you were coherent enough to know, man, there's an officer just got blasted. I'm in a big deal of trouble, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're sitting on the curb, and there's a great deal of activity going on, and people are trying to save this officer, and you tell somebody at the scene that I got carjacked, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what you're telling people.
Yes.
I had nothing to do with this. I got carjacked, right?
Yes.
And then one of the paramedics asked you what happened, and you go into more detail, right?
Correct.
I got carjacked. Somebody I don't know got in the car, put a gun on me, and told me to drive, and they carjacked me, right?
Correct.
And consistently, and this is before police officers began talking to you, right? This is EMTs
Correct.
and just bystanders. You wanted to make it known as quickly as possible that, man, this isn't on me, right?
Correct.
You were coherent enough to start making up stories
Correct.
about your involvement even before the cops started talking to you, right?
Correct.
Yeah, this was just some random dude who was there. You start telling the story about getting carjacked, right?
Yes.
And then the EMTs, they're not trying to lay any heavy stuff on you. You just start telling them, hey man, I got carjacked. This didn't tell me. I got carjacked by some people I didn't know, right?
Correct.
And what you told them was also that there were two people that carjacked you, right?
Correct.
And you added a little tidbit about the guy you didn't know, he had the gun, and the girl laid down in the back, and the officer didn't see him, right? You added these little tidbits.
Correct.
Right. So, fairly detailed, right?
Correct.
And again, you said before that meth helps you, makes you fairly coherent.
Correct.
And so meth must have been acting in an amazing way because you were just making up stories as quickly as you could, right?
Correct, because I was minimizing my involvement in everything.
You certainly were. You certainly were. And you minimized your involvement to be zero, right?
Correct.
All right. And then you're transported by EMTs and you get to the hospital and you talk to a police officer named Pope, right?
Correct.
And this is really the first time when you talk to this detective or this police officer that this is your first real contact with the police, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you told the story about getting carjacked twice, right? At least twice,
Correct.
right? And you keep it up with Pope, right?
Correct.
And you told the officer that you got carjacked. But before you tell the officer you get carjacked, you begin negotiating with him about going home, right?
Correct.
Yeah, because that's your number one thing, is you want to get the hell out of there. You need to be out of the hospital, out of jail, out of police custody, right?
Correct.
Because you know there's a dead cop, and you know that you've got all these problems, and you know enough to make up a story with where you have zero involvement, right?
Correct.
And so I think that one of the first things you tell Officer Pope is you ask him, can I go home tomorrow, right?
Correct.
And then he says, kind of tell me what happened. You tell him that you were carjacked, you pulled over beside the road on Southern, right?
Correct.
And two people asked to use your phone, right?
Correct.
And before you knew it, they had a pistol on you.
Correct.
And it was a man and a woman.
Correct.
And the woman hid during the stop, and the dude held the gun on you.
Correct.
And then you get thrown out somehow, and you hear the shots, right?
Correct.
All right. And you say that somehow you got shot in the foot,
Correct.
and the two people in the car with you were a boy and a girl,
Correct.
that you'd never seen them before.
Correct.
You said specifically, I don't know who the guy is, right?
Correct.
And then you said, in relationship to the shooting, you said there was a big old commotion, and a lot of stuff happened, and there was a lot of stuff happening. I got thrown out of the truck. The next thing you know, my foot's bleeding, or my foot is numb. And then you hear a boom, 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 right? Remember saying that?
Yes, but I said boom, boom, boom 4 times.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your foot goes numb, then you hear boom, 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 right? You remember
Yes.
saying that?
Yes.
And then you tell the officer, I just want to let you know, I'm not that type of person. I'm on parole for my past, and yeah, I did get high today, but I don't have nothing to do with this situation, right? You remember telling the officer that?
Correct.
And then he said, I want to apologize. What in the world were you apologizing for?
I don't remember.
And then you begin complaining to the EMT tech or the x-ray tech about the treatment you're getting, right? That they're being too rough on you, that why do I have to take another x-ray, right? And so here you are in the hospital, and you're already telling, according to you, some pretty big lies about your involvement, right?
Correct.
And you start complaining about the level of treatment you're getting at the hospital, right?
Correct.
And then you say, after you gripe about the way that the treatment's being rendered, you want to make sure where your money's going, right? You're concerned about your cash, right?
I was concerned about all my items.
Well, you said, hey, sir, if you guys have my money because that's all the money I have, and the police officer tells you, you know, your money's going to be fine, right?
I don't recall.
If I showed you a copy of the transcript, would that refresh your recollection? Would it?
Yes.
Belt tape, page 14, line 20.
Piece of a transcript, only if it refreshes your memory.
Just read it to yourself, about line 15 to line 23, and tell me when you've had a chance.
And it's only if it refreshes your memory. You still don't remember.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Okay. Do you have any reason to believe, ma'am, that this transcript is not an exact replica of the conversation, of a transcript of the recording that was taken with you at the hospital?
No.
Okay. You just don't remember saying that?
Correct.
But you'll agree with me that the transcript indicates that you had a conversation with the officer about where's my money, right?
Correct.
Now, when you were in the hospital, this first time when you were having your foot x-rayed, you'd already overheard that Officer Benner had died, right?
I have.
And so here you are, griping about the care and asking about your money, And you know there's a dead officer just a few doors down from you, right?
Correct.
And then after you talked to Officer Pope, you talked to another officer from the Rio Rancho Police Department, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And this was after you were actually in a hospital room by now, correct? Or were you still kind of in the ER?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And were you still high?
Yes.
And when you talked to this police officer, you indicated that that you'd been trapped for a month. You'd given up on kind of the story about the carjacking, right?
Correct.
Maybe that wasn't going to work out for you, right? Maybe the carjacking story wasn't going to work out for you, right?
I didn't even think about if it was or not. I just...
Well, for some reason you changed your story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you moved to a new story that this guy, who you wouldn't name, had trapped you for a month and was holding you hostage, right?
Right.
And was forcing you to do all these terrible things against your will, right?
Correct.
And he said he trapped you for a month and that you don't want to go to prison, right? And he took you at gunpoint. He trapped you for a month and took you at gunpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Correct. I said that.
Okay. And you said, page 7, line 3, I just don't want to go back to prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Yes.
why
Yes.
would you be worried about going back to prison? You hadn't done anything according to you.
Oh, because I was on parole. I had a parole violation for being out of the county.
As we've already established, you had a lot to lose, right?
Yeah, but I wasn't even thinking about me having dirty away, all that stuff. I wasn't even thinking about that at that time, having a dirty away and
Well,
stuff.
you were thinking about something because you said, and I quote, and I just don't want to go back to prison, so you were certainly thinking about something, right?
My violation because I was being out of the county. Yes.
And then you talked about he had you trapped and he beats me, right? And that you smoked a bowl and a half, and that you're trying to get saved and shit, so I can go home. You remember that?
Yes.
You were telling the officer specifically, I'm trying to get saved and shit, you know, so I can go home, right?
I don't recall exactly what I said.
If I showed you a copy of the transcript, would that refresh your recollection?
I could try.
You want to give it a shot?
Yes.
Hospital interview number 1, page 8, line 20.
Same thing, so you review it. If it refreshes your memory, and you have it in memory, then you answer the question.
Okay.
Read line about not line 19 to line 22 to yourself and see if that refreshes your recollection.
Yeah, I remember saying that.
Okay, so you agree with me that that you said, I'm just trying to get saved and shit, you know, so I can go home?
Yes.
Right.
I remember saying that.
Okay. And then the officer asked you to tell you who the man that was with you was, right?
Correct.
And you've already established that you wanted to go home, right? And
Yes.
you say, I always help everybody because I think I can help them and I want to be a savior, right? You were saying that?
Yes.
Yeah, and then you also said, I just want to go home, right?
Correct.
And you said, if I give you his name, will you promise me that I can go home, right? Remember saying that?
Yes.
Now, not one time did you ask about the dead cop who you knew was dead a few doors down, right?
Objection, Your Honor, I believe she did. I think it's a misquote of what you're doing.
You hadn't asked a single
Your
time.
Honor, can we approach at this point?
So,
this point in time, asked about Officer Bender one time, right?
No.
And what you say to the police officer is, if you give me his name, will you promise I can go home, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
And then you said, you promise, right?
Correct.
And then you said, I will give you his real name, right? Remember saying that?
Correct.
And he said, but I just don't want to go to prison. I want to go home back to my kids. Because I wasn't in the car when the gun went off, right? Remember saying that?
Yes.
And then you say, he put a gun to me, right? And you explain it, and he put the pedal and pushed the pedal, but you still haven't given his real name, right?
Correct.
And then you talk about your daughters. I want to give you his name, but I don't want to. I can't go back to prison, okay, just for a dirty UA. Right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the police officer says,
Yes.
I'm going to talk with your PO. Okay, I'm going to leave. What I'm going to do, the best I can say. And you say, am I going to jail tonight? Remember that?
Yes.
And the officer said, no, you're not. And you say, tomorrow. Right? Remember saying that?
Yes.
And the officer says, you know, this is the best I can tell you. This is what I can tell you. I'm going to talk to the probation department, right?
Correct.
Okay. And still haven't given the officer any name of any individual in the car, right?
No.
Because you're still negotiating, because you're doing your dadgum best not to go to jail, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the police officer says, you're not arrested, right? We're having this conversation?
Correct.
And you say, but are you going to arrest me, right?
Correct.
And he says, no, you haven't done anything wrong, right? Remember that?
Yes.
And you say, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with a stupid idiot, right?
Yeah.
You still haven't given his name, right?
No.
And then you say, I had nothing to do with it, right?
Correct.
And then you say, can I go home today, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the cop says, well, obviously not tonight. And then you say again, well, in the morning, tomorrow, right? Remember that?
Yes.
You're still negotiating because you're trying your best to go home, right?
Correct.
And you still haven't given any information regarding the name of the person in the car with you, right?
Correct.
And then the officer says, okay, who are we looking for, right? And you say, okay, and you promise I'm not going to jail for this, right?
Correct.
And he says, yeah, not for this, right?
Yes.
And it was only after you had negotiated with the police officer and you were sure that you weren't getting arrested, you were certain in your mind that you weren't going to jail, that you said Andrew Romero, right?
Yes.
And it was your word. It was your recitation of the name Andrew, and that alone, best of your knowledge. And you only told the police Andrew Romero's name because you thought you had a binding agreement with the cops that you weren't getting arrested in your mind, right?
Correct.
Now, you got mad later because Steve Montano said, I didn't make you any promises, right?
Correct.
Yeah, when Steve Montano in the next statement comes in and starts reading you your rights, you're just flabbergasted, right?
I was upset, yes.
Because you thought you had a deal, right?
Yes.
And you thought your deal was going to get you scot-free, right?
Correct.
And you thought you'd negotiated and leveraged yourself into a spot where they couldn't touch you, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Because you made a deal with a cop, right? With a cop. With a police officer from Rio Rancho, right? With a cop. With a police officer from Rio Rancho, right?
Correct.
And based on that deal, you thought you were walking away from this, right?
Correct.
And you thought it was all going to fall on Andrew. Yeah.
Just what were you thinking at that time?
I wasn't thinking about who it would fall on. I was just thinking about myself right at that time.
Well, you told him Andrew, right? What do you think they were going to do? Buy him a cake?
No. I knew that they would go look for him.
Go look for him?
Yeah.
And you knew, or you thought you knew, that they were going to... You thought they were going to leave you alone and they'd go look for Andrew.
Correct.
And you thought that you were going to walk away from all this because, like we've already talked about, you made a deal with a police officer, right?
Correct.
And you told this police officer that you lied before and you'd made up your previous stories, right?
Correct.
And that this was the God honest truth, but you'd been lying before, right?
Correct.
And your reason, if I'm not mistaken, that you lied to the EMTs and other person at the scene is because, and I quote, because I didn't even know what the fuck to tell them, you know? And they really wanted to hear a good story. So I said, yeah, I'll tell them a good story, you know. You saying that?
I don't recall.
Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the transcript?
It might.
Well, may I approach witness? Page 24, line 10. Line 10 through 13. Read it to yourself and tell me when you refresh your recollection.
Can you read it?
Quick statement.
That's if that refreshes your memory, so you
Hospital.
remember now.
Not the first, rear end police department, not belt tape.
I don't recall.
Well, let me ask the question. So, having reviewed the transcript, does that refresh your recollection about what you said to the police regarding telling a good story?
No.
Okay. Do you have any reason to believe that this is not an accurate transcript of what you told the police during this interview?
No, I don't.
You don't believe it's somehow a misconstruction of your words?
No.
You just don't remember?
I just don't remember.
Okay. And so, do you remember a few lines later that when you said they really wanted to hear a good story, so you know, so I was stupid fucks, you know? I'm saying that?
No.
And then further into the conversation, you again say, now can I go home? If my PO says I can go home, can I go home, right?
Yes.
And you told the police that in this interview that you kept to the story that that when you were driving and you saw the police officer behind you, you actually swerved on purpose to get his attention so that maybe he'd stop and maybe you could be freed of this awful, terrible situation, right?
Yeah, I lied about that.
Now, when you ultimately told the police that it was Andrew Romero, they wanted his phone number, right?
Yes.
They asked if you could find it in your phone, right?
Yes.
And you had Andrew's phone number under what in your phone?
I was under Daddy.
Dad. You referred to Andrew as Dad, right?
Yes.
Interestingly enough, when asked about the color of the vehicle, well, how long have you had this truck?
I've had it since I've been out of prison for about a year and 3 months.
So you knew what color it was, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's silver, right?
Yes.
Do you remember what you told the police the color of the vehicle was when they asked you?
No.
Would you be surprised to know that you told them it was brownish, kind of brownish gray?
I don't remember.
Would it refresh your recollection to see the transcript of this recording?
It might.
Approach the witness. Page 39, line 19 through 21.
No.
So So after having reviewed the transcript, does that refresh your recollection that you told the police that this vehicle was brown, brownish gray?
I don't remember.
Okay. Any reason to believe that this transcript isn't an exact reproduction of your statement to the police?
No.
Do you remember telling the police, during the statement that when Andrew hopped on your lap and you got thrown out, that you looked up and you saw the police officer trying to take Andrew out of the car?
I don't remember that. I don't remember.
If I approach you with the transcript, would that perhaps refresh your recollection regarding what you told the police?
It might.
You want to give it a shot?
I can.
First witness. Page 44, lines 12 through 22. Why don't you take a look at the highlighted portion all the way to line 19.
Lines what?
I'll have to get it upside down. Lines 12 through 18.
So the question is, does that refresh your memory of any kind of statement?
No.
After having reviewed the transcript, does that refresh your recollection as to what you told the police?
No.
Will you agree with me that the transcript reflects that you told the police that when you were thrown, let's see, Andrew hopped in your lap and he pushes the gas and he opens the door and he pushes me out and my shit out and my phone, my brand new phone, but I go, fuck the phone, I don't care. He pushed me out and I fell out of the car and I know he has the phone, and then he ran toward the truck, and I seen the door open. It's right there at the truck, and it's like there's the seat, and you know it's because the cop was trying to pull him out or trying to get him out. Is that what the transcript reflects?
That's what the transcript says.
You don't remember saying that to the police, though?
I could have said that. I don't remember saying it.
Okay. Do you remember telling the police that Andrew didn't say nothing about hurting the officer or nothing about running or nothing? Remember saying that?
Can you repeat that?
Do you remember telling the officers that Andrew, didn't say nothing about hurting the officer or nothing, no running or nothing, okay? Remember saying that?
He never said nothing like that. I remember saying it.
Okay. And you remember telling the police officer that Andrew, didn't know what was going to happen, and when the officer came back, okay, right? Andrew didn't know, according to you, Andrew didn't know that the police officer was going to do anything, right?
Repeat that again?
Well, you were telling the police officer that in this interview that there was no plan to hurt an officer, right?
No, there was no plan to hurt
And
an officer.
and that you thought the officer was going to come back to the car and maybe give you a little bit of grief about the registration, right?
Right.
And there certainly wasn't any plan afoot, according to you, to hurt anybody, right?
No.
And in this statement, you mentioned nothing about Andrew having a gun, right?
Correct.
And you mentioned nothing about Andrew putting the gun on the side of the seat, right?
No.
And nothing about Andrew saying it's going to be either me or the cops, right?
At that time, no.
Yeah. Nothing about Andrew making any statements about it's me or them. I'm not going back to prison, right?
Correct. Andrew never made no statement at that time.
Do you remember, ma'am, telling one of the hospital orderlies or somebody at the hospital
Yeah. Okay.
So do you remember getting ready to have your photograph taken by the police at the hospital?
No, I don't remember.
You don't remember getting your picture taken?
I remember not the exact time getting it. I mean, I remember them taking my pictures.
Okay. Do you remember telling somebody at the hospital, asking if you could put on a little makeup before you had your photograph taken?
No, I don't remember that.
Remember that?
No.
Objection, I don't know what counsel talking about.
Can you approach real quick?
And so, do it fine.
I don't remember making that statement.
Okay. And then you were interviewed a second time at the hospital. The Rio Rancho police officer leaves, and another Rio Rancho police officer comes, but this time he has a stater with him, right? Steve Montano, who's an agent with the state police.
Correct.
And this is when things get kind of rough for you, right? Yeah?
Yes.
Because the minute Agent Montano walks through the door, one of the first things he does is read you your rights, right?
Correct.
And he reads your rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have a right to a lawyer. And you don't know quite what's going on, do you?
No.
Because you think you've got to deal with this other officer, right?
Yes.
And then during the course of this statement, you continue to tell Officer Montano that you weren't a part of it. It's just a fucking situation, that I was there when and Officer Montano says he didn't hold you at gunpoint, and he said no. You said no, but he wouldn't let you go home, right?
I said that, but Andrew never held me against my will at any time. I stayed willingly with him.
You're still lying to the police.
At that time, yes.
Yeah. And then you start talking about that you'd only been doing meth for, let's see, about a week, right? He asks you about meth, and you say, I don't do drugs. I've been clean. I've been clean since I got out of prison. This morning I just said, hey, he has some meth. And I was like, maybe I'll do some of
Correct. I
this.
remember saying that.
I get freaky and just get out of my mind, get my mind clear, whatever, block shit out, you know? Understand that?
I remember saying that.
I get a little freaky, right?
I don't remember saying I get a little freaky.
Would it refresh your recollection if you saw the statement?
It might. I'm not sure.
Approach the witness. Line 13, Steve Montano's statement. Line 17 through 22.
I don't remember.
All right. Will you agree with me that according to the transcript of your statement, you indicated that you get a little freaky and want to, in quotes, just get out, get my mind clear or whatever, block shit out, you know? Right? That's what you read?
Yes, that's what I read.
And you still told Agent Montano that you swerved so that you'd get pulled over, right?
Correct.
And Agent Montano asked, and you remember Agent Montano telling, he said he told you to get out because he didn't want you to get involved in what he was about to do. And you said, well, maybe that's what he said. He said he told me that he was pushing me out. And Agent Montano said, that's what he told you, right? And you said, I was so high, I don't even remember. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't remember what his exact words were, right?
I remember his exact words. He says, I don't want you to be a part of anything that's going to happen, so I'm pushing you out of the vehicle.
And that's what you said today, right?
Yes.
But way back when you just got to the hospital on May 25th, you told the agent that you were so high that you couldn't even remember what was said in the car, right? That's what you said.
At that time, yes.
And then during that same statement, you changed your tune a little bit, and you remembered when questioned by Officer Montano, you said, Andrew said he wasn't going back to jail. And you said when the cop came around to his side, he didn't want you to be involved. And Agent Montano said he told you something along the lines, I'm going to shoot the cop. And you said, yeah. I'm saying that?
Yes.
Yeah. So in this statement, you will agree with me that on the one hand, you said, I was so high, I can't remember what got said. And then in another breath, you're telling the agent, yeah, Andrew told me he was going to shoot the police officer.
Correct.
Correct? And then there's another interview with police officers, and it looks like this was on the 29th of May. Is that after you've been discharged from the hospital?
Yes.
How long were you in the hospital?
From
Interview with police officers, and it looks like this was on the 29th of May. Is that after you've been discharged from the hospital?
Yes.
How long were you in the hospital?
From
Interview with police officers, and it looks like this was on the 29th of May. Is that after you've been discharged from the hospital?
Yes.
How long were you in the hospital?
From
Interview with police officers, and it looks like this was on the 29th of May. Is that after you've been discharged from the hospital?
Yes.
How long were you in the hospital?
From I went to the detention center until after I left the state police office that day. I went from the hospital to the state police office.
I apologize. So you were in the hospital because you asked to be taken to talk to the police again, right?
Correct.
Okay. And this time you knew that you were a suspect because the officer had told you, Agent Montano had told you were a suspect, right?
Correct. And he had came while I was still in the hospital and served me with some papers.
Okay. And there's talk about who Crystal Montoya is, right?
Correct.
And this is the first time that you admit that you were friends with Crystal from prison, right?
I don't remember.
Do you remember find that in just a second. Do you remember telling him at this point in time that you'd been smoking meth all day long and you and Andrew had been doing drugs all day long during this interview?
Yes.
And this is the first time that you told the police that you were dealing drugs and that you'd sold drugs at the halfway house?
Yes.
And during this interview, the police asked you, and the police officer asked you, he basically tells you, I'm gonna shoot this cop, and you said, basically, right? Remember that?
I remember saying that.
And you told the police you just knew what he meant, right?
I don't remember.
You don't remember saying, he says that he ain't saying that, yeah, and the police officer says, but you knew what he meant, and you said, I knew what he meant, I knew what he meant.
Can I see that?
Sure. Edwards witness, page 35, 529. Lines 8 through 15.
I remember saying that, but Andrew never said he was going to shoot the cop that day.
And so what I'm getting at is you're your testimony today is that you're still lying to the police throughout all of these interviews, right?
Yes.
But you also qualified it by saying that that you didn't think Andrew was going to shoot, right?
Correct.
And do you remember telling the police during this 529 interview that I didn't have no more of my dope, I didn't have any more dope, I didn't have no drugs of mine, he had all his drugs?
I remember saying he had his drugs and I didn't have none of mine. Yeah, but I really did have some.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. But you remember telling the police you didn't have any drugs on you?
Yes.
And then you say to Officer Montano, what are my charges? I remember this conversation?
Yes.
And he said, I told you what your charges are, right?
Correct.
And you say, even though I helped you, you told me if I helped you, you said, even if I helped you, said if I helped you, then what? I'm getting in trouble for this, right? Remember saying that?
Yes.
And you said, officer said, yeah, you're still going to get charged. You know that. We didn't promise you that you weren't getting charged, right? Remember that?
Correct.
And you said, okay. And you said the detective from Rio Rancho, he said if I told him his name, I wouldn't get in trouble. I wouldn't be in trouble. And the police officer said, I can't talk for that guy, but I never promised you anything, right?
Correct.
At this point in time, you knew you were in a real hook, right?
Yes.
And then Steve Montano came to talk to you again, right? Steve Montano came to talk to you another time?
When?
There were several interviews, but do you remember Steve Montano asking you, so when the officer ran by and asked you if you were okay, why didn't you tell him?
Objection. If counsel could make a reference as to when this occurred.
It's, may we approach real quick, Judge? May we approach real quick? Montano was talking to you. Do you remember him asking you, so when the officer ran by and asked you if you were okay, why didn't you tell him? And your response was, why didn't I tell him? Because I got scared, sir. I did not, at that time I was so, maybe that's an excuse, but you know, I don't remember nothing like that at the time because I was so fucking gone and my mind was flipping. You say that?
I remember saying that.
And then the agent says, let me stop you there. And you say, I was so gone. Right?
Correct.
And you referring to your mental state, at least I presume, because of the level or the amount of drugs you've ingested, right?
Right. I use me being high as an excuse of not knowing.
Because methamphetamines makes you more clear of mind, right?
Correct.
And then you said, I can't remember, and so later on, until later, when I was coming down, when I was remembering little by little, okay, little by little, when I was coming down. Remember saying that? Using that as an excuse for these past lies?
Yes.
Okay, then the next time you gave an interview was at the DA's office, right?
No, last time I gave an interview was at the district court in Sandoval.
No, I'm going in sequential order. So back on August 8th of 2016, before you entered into your plea agreement, you and Mr. Porter and Mr. Porter's partner sat down with Mr. Lopez and Ms. Romo, right?
Yes, it was at the courthouse.
Oh, it was at the courthouse. Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry. That was a debrief, as we call it, right?
Yes.
And you were supposed to testify truthfully at that, and then the determination was going to be made between you and your lawyer about you getting in some sort of deal, right?
Correct.
Okay. And presumably you're sober at this time, right?
Yes.
And presumably you hadn't done any drugs in a while because you've been locked up, right?
Correct.
And at this point in time, you know that your future hangs in the balance, right? Because what you tell, what you tell the district attorney's office, in your mind, is going to depend a large degree what the deal you get is going to be, right?
Correct.
And so you know that you need to be as good as you can possibly be. You need to give them everything they want because you think a deal hangs in the balance.
That's not the thing. That's improper at this point. The plea indicates to be truthful, and there are safeguards in that plea agreement that guards that, Your Honor, and that is a misquote.
And quite frankly, Your Honor, she hasn't been truthful up to this point. And the question
Well,
is...
Your Honor, that's...
All right. So at this debrief for the district attorney's office, you give more information about getting high with Crystal, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that Andrew was, for the first time you told the police, or you told the district attorney that Andrew was using both crystal meth and heroin, and shooting speedballs, he was smoking meth, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that you confirmed that the two of you were high all day, right?
Yes.
And used drugs shortly before the stop, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you confirmed at that time that you were the only one that went into the Valero, right?
Correct.
And you gave a description of the shooting very similar to the one you gave today. Andrew hopped on top of you, the door was opened, you were pushed out, right?
Correct.
Okay. Then Andrew threw your purse and your phone, right?
Correct.
And that you were pushed out of the car and you had no injuries, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And for the first time, the very first time, you indicated that the two of you, you and Andrew, were contemplating robbing the Twisters, right?
Correct.
That's the first time, on the eve of you entering into a plea, was the first time that you'd ever mentioned to any law enforcement officer that you and Andrew were going to
That was the place that we were looking at to rob? Yes, that was the first time.
Okay. And at this point in time, when asked about the proposed robbery of Twisters, you indicated that Andrew was fixing right before, which he was shooting up, and you were smoking meth right before this robbery was about to go down, right?
The last time we did drugs was, the last time any of us did drugs was when we stopped at the Valero.
Well, do you remember being asked these questions and giving these answers? And Ms. Romo asked you, so that's where he was contemplating, page 33, line 20, and you said contemplating, yes. And Mr. Lopez says, on the way to Twisters, are you talking at all between you and Andrew? And you say, no, he was getting into the mode before he gets ready to go in somewhere, like to be in his own little zone, and I was too busy twisting and smoking the bubble, right? Remember saying that?
Yes.
Okay. And then Ms. Romo said, and you said that's because we didn't even talk. And Ms. Romo said, can you tell us a little more? And you said, because he was fixing. He was shooting, he was fixing a shot to do at that time. Right? Remember being asked those questions, giving those answers?
I don't. Hold on. I don't remember.
Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the transcript?
Yeah, let me see.
May I approach the witness, Judge? Page 34, starting at line 1 to the bottom of the page. Read that to yourself.
Yeah, I didn't. Before,
Let me just approach you real
Okay.
quick. All right, does that refresh your recollection?
yes,
Okay, and do you remember being asked those questions and giving those answers?
yes. But I don't ever remember saying that after we left the Velero, we were getting high.
Okay. Do you agree with me that the transcript reflects, right before the robbery, that you were smoking the bubble and Andrew was fixing a shot?
It was prior before we stopped at the Valero.
Okay. Now, one of your prior felony, well, let me ask you this. Do you remember telling Ms. Romo that, that you do not wish violence upon anybody and that you don't like violence?
Correct.
Okay. Now, we talked previously about your felony convictions, right?
Correct.
And one of your felony convictions was for a robbery, a conspiracy to commit a robbery, right?
Correct.
And that robbery, you certainly very much did want to put violence on somebody, didn't you?
No, I did not.
Well, let me ask you, you've testified previously that you were working as a prostitute and you picked up a John, right?
Yes.
And you got the John in your car, right?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, she didn't testify to that.
That you've testified previously. Well, let me ask you, did you conspire with two other men to hold your John at knife point?
No. I got into the John's car, and he wanted to score some dope, and so the two guys that I was with got in with us, and we went and we parked somewhere, and that's when one of the guys had him at pulled the knife on him and got him for his wallet.
Okay. And you pled to conspiracy to commit armed robbery, right?
Correct.
Okay. And during the course of this conversation with Ms. Romo asked you why you never once cried or asked about Officer Benner, right?
Correct.
And you really didn't have an answer, did you?
The reason why I never asked about Officer Benner is because when I was taken into the emergency room, I already knew what had happened to him because I heard them say he did not make it.
So your previous knowledge that the officer died somehow made it where you didn't want to show any emotion or didn't cry?
It's not that I don't want to show emotion. I hold my emotion in, so nobody can sit here and say that I do not show emotion. I do not care.
Well, actually, you've already testified about previously about a reason why you showed no emotion at the hospital, right?
Because I was high.
Because you were high, but there's more to that, right? Because when you went into the hospital, the meth that was in your bra, you stuck up your vagina, and while you were at the hospital, you stayed high the entire time, right? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. While Officer Benner lay dead or dying, a few doors down, you were in your hospital room using methamphetamine that you had inserted in your vagina after the officer had been killed, correct?
Yes.
And during your entire stay at the hospital, you continued to take the methamphetamine out of your vagina, do some of it, and put the rest back up in you, right?
Yes.
So you wouldn't get caught, so you could stay loaded, right?
Right.
And you've testified that, you've already said you don't like violence, but you're less emotional when you're high, right?
Correct.
And so you blame the drug use at the hospital for the lack of emotion for this officer's death, right?
No.
No? Well, do you recall when Mr. Romo asked you, when you said, no, when I'm high, like when I do meth or crack, because crack is really my drug of choice, it helps me. It's a mind blocker for me. I see. So it helps me block out a lot of stuff, right?
Yes, it does.
So I ask you again, how much methamphetamine did you have that you packed for your trip, so to speak, between the time Officer Benner was shot until you got to the hospital and wanted to get high?
It was a pretty good amount.
It was enough for you to stay high the entire time you were at the hospital, right?
Yes.
And did you have any left over when you went to jail?
No.
So you made sure you got it all done before you went to jail.
Yes.
And would you take it out secretly and do it when the nurses weren't around?
I was in my room. I had a guard outside my room, so I was in my room by myself.
Okay. Guard outside, what'd you do? You use a little dinner table to put together, chop up lines?
I don't object to the relevancy at this point.
It's highly relevant.
What'd you guys, Counsel?